Good afternoon. I'm David Sommers. I'm the publisher of the Long Beach Post and Long Beach Business Journal. Thank you for joining us for today's live chat, our ongoing live chats with local leaders and decision makers, talking about the impacts on the coronavirus pandemic on various institutions. This week, we've been talking to education leaders. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Dr. Jane Conoley, president of California State University, Long Beach State, our hometown university. And joining me to help host this discussion is Rachel Barnes, managing editor of the Daily 49er. Rachel, thanks for being here with us. Before we get started with questions, I just want to give a couple of notes to anyone out there watching. We love to hear your questions. We'd be happy to pose your questions to Dr. Conoley. We can take your questions if you comment at the bottom of the social feeds where you're watching this live, and I'll ask questions as we go through this discussion. But thank you, Jane, for being here with us today. And Rachel and I talked a little bit before the beginning. I was hoping you could just start by telling us about the early days of this, about some of the decisions that you and your team had to make and what those first days were like at the university.
Well, thanks. And I'm really happy to be here with both of you and appreciate the chance to have a conversation. So, the early days were all about, checking was somebody sick on campus, especially looking at our residential group, trying to figure out what was going to be the trigger when we had to go to remote, if we had to go to remote instruction, and really learning what the kind of parameters were of the situation, because I've been in higher ed for a long time and I thought I had seen everything, but I had never seen anything like this. So the biggest decision was the remote learning, that we would have to go to that because we couldn't keep that many people meeting together on the campus. And then we had to look at, what about the students in the residence hall? Would we require them to leave? We, of course, decided not to require, but to urge them to leave for their own safety. We've ended up with 130 students. We're still housing and feeding there. And then it went to, trying to figure out what supports for faculty so they could transform their classes from face-to-face to remote, virtual. But the biggest thing has been monitoring health and safety. And that's, we had custodians. What do we have to buy for them? What kind of new stuff? So we have a new disinfectant machine where they can kind of use a wand to just, with tiny little droplets, dare I say the word, that will disinfect a room very quickly. And then also another thing that is called something like a nebulizer that looks like a kind of space gun. So there were so many layers of protecting people, getting new equipment, understanding, how many people could be on campus and be safe. So it was quite the whirlwind. I'm glad that I was taking notes the whole time. If maybe someday I'll have enough courage to go back and read what it was. We had great. We changed our executive committee to include our medical director and our police chief. So that's been, kind of on the fly creating things like who needs to be involved in every conversation has been a big issue.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was super interesting. So as you mentioned, there wasn't really like a protocol or this is how you deal with a pandemic. Were you prepared for any of this? Was this just something that because this is something we've never dealt with before, was this something that you knew how to go through?
Well, surprisingly, for me, the university had many what are called business continuity plans. Not that they'd been updated, a week ago, but there were in all the offices, there was an understanding of what we would do if a whole bunch of people got sick, or what about an earthquake? What about a big accident? And so we went immediately to those plans with the help, especially of our vice president for administration and finance, and started dusting them off, and then started showing them to the deans and the other on the academic side about how do we adapt that on the academic side. So although it was true that I had never experienced anything, it turned out that the university had created some of these contingencies when there was a measles outbreak, when there was swine flu, when there was SARS. And I'm sure I was at a university during those times, but I didn't have this role. So I wasn't responsible for everything. So it's been, it's a very difficult situation, but it certainly is a learning situation.
It's good that they had that in place.
It really was.
Yeah. So we got the announcement this morning that summer classes are going to be all online. Is there anything like that in place for fall classes, or what's the plan for fall classes?
Yeah, we're hoping that fall will be face-to-face. It really comes down to whether or not public health officials will allow for gatherings of at all, or gatherings of a certain size. So we have started thinking about, like, fortunately at Cal State Long Beach, we don't have that many huge sections. We don't have, other places have 400 or 500 students at a time. We don't typically have that, but this morning we started saying, well, what if they said you could only have 25 people together? How would we make the classes smaller? So we'd have to kind of double up on things. So anyway, it is our hope that we will be back to face in the fall, and that we'll have commencement in the fall, 2020 commencement in the fall, and it will be face-to-face. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. There's no date for that as of yet, right? We're just still waiting on.
We're kind of waiting on it. We were tossing around times around Thanksgiving. We thought that would give us enough buffer. But then I was on, I meet every afternoon with all the other presidents of the system. And at least the president in San Francisco immediately said, oh, in San Francisco, they're not going to allow mass gatherings, is her prediction at least, until 2021. So that made me think, but I know we'll figure something out. And the students have been very strong in saying that they really look forward to the face-to-face, and they don't want some virtual creation. So I'm very influenced by that. I really want that to happen. And I like shaking everybody's hand too. So
I can't wait to shake your hand. I'm graduating in the fall as well.
Yay. Yay. I can't wait either, Rachel.
Yay. And so you said that you were meeting with the other CSU presidents. I've noticed a little bit of a discrepancy on the dates of everything being like taking down from face-to-face. Why do you think that discrepancy has been there?
Well, I think, the universities in the system are so different. You compare us to Humboldt or Chico or Sonoma, or, so, and the rate of the increase in the disease was different in some of those counties. So the northern counties around San Francisco, they were under pressure pretty quickly. Not so in some of the, Inland Empire areas, perhaps. So that explains most of it. And but one reason we're meeting almost every day, I think we just canceled the one this afternoon, so I don't have a meeting at 4:00. Yay! Was trying to get our acts together, because it creates confusion and sometimes bad feelings if one campus does one thing and the other campus doesn't do another thing. But we have a lot of autonomy, but we try to tell each other, here's what I'm going to do. So if we had met this afternoon, for example, I would have told them that we've made the decision that if students are paying on their tuition on installment plan, usually if they hadn't paid, they wouldn't be allowed to register for the summer. But we've made a decision not to enforce that, so that students can register for the summer, even if they still owe money for the spring. And so I would have told them that we're doing it, because of course, as soon as we do it, then, the students across the system will say, well, Long Beach is doing it, why aren't you doing it? So.
Jane, we've got a couple good questions coming in from viewers right now. Rachel asked you the very first one about with summer session being moved online and plans for fall. Thank you for answering that one. But two questions from viewers. The first is, what's the university's policy for students' grades for the spring semester? Has there been discussion on that? And then a question I'm really interested in from a viewer. Is the university involved with any of the research regarding COVID-19, or any of the faculty working on anything that you're aware of?
Well, I'll go for grades, because that's almost it's almost a contemporaneous thing going on. Right now, we are just using our usual approach, which is certain classes are approved ahead of time to be credit, no credit. And students have a deadline to ask for credit, no credit in certain classes. So that's still in place. But this afternoon at 2:00, when I talked to the Academic Senate, they are debating that. So I think what will happen is that all classes will be available for credit, no credit, and the deadline for students to ask for it will be extended. So it'll still be in the students' hands, whether they get a grade or a credit or no credit. And, I think that's very important because certain student groups would be harmed by a credit, no credit. Vets could face consequences, student athletes. I mean, it would take changing lots of regulations. So I think by this afternoon, we'll have a kind of student opting in or not into a credit, no credit for the classes they're taking. In fact, I'm 99% sure.
Great. And any research going on at the university? Any faculty working on things related to coronavirus?
I haven't heard of them working kind of at the molecular level, but they might very well be, although most of the people are not in their labs. But we have a group of faculty and staff who've commandeered our big innovation space in the library, and they've been producing those kind of face shields. And that was going on at the same time. A group of our engineering students on their own, they have formed a society, and they were doing the same thing. So I don't know if we're doing research, but I know we're trying our best and to be helpful. We also inventoried all of our own personal protective equipment and have donated a whole bunch of stuff to area hospitals.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I have a question that we got from one of our followers on Instagram, and she wants to know if the school is still monitoring the 2 students that tested positive for the virus, and if there are any updates on those students.
Yes, it turned out that at this point we know of 4 students who tested positive. We're in very constant contact with them. They're all recovered. None of them needed hospitalization, and we're aware of one staff person who was briefly hospitalized, but is now home already. So, this is our medical director, Dr. Fodrin, has done a great job in her community health approach. So she contacts everybody, stays in touch, asks when they were on campus, who they contacted. We do have 2 students now who we have tested, but we don't have 2 additional students, I should say, but we don't have the results back yet. We're still very slow in getting the results.
Okay. It's good to hear that they've recovered. I'm glad.
Yes, I think so far we've stayed healthy.
Yay. And to continue with my questions, we have some people that are concerned about the housing application that just went out. They don't know, because everything's so up in the air with fall semester and summer semester, they don't know how that's going to affect if they move in just to be told to move out again. Is there a plan in place for that?
Not that exact scenario. We're taking applications as if we're starting off just like last fall, But so we're not looking at that scenario, although now that you say it to me, I should write it down. We did open that website just a few days ago, I guess, and I started to get tweets from people that they couldn't get through. Apparently, in some weird way of the universe, 800 people tried to get on the website at almost exactly the same time, and it crashed. So they were busy kind of increasing capacity, but the applications to live in the dorms and student housing are actually up versus last year. And interestingly, our enrollment numbers are, they track them every day they're actually higher than last year too. So we have our fingers crossed that people are not being discouraged by this. We would give lots of notice if we had to come to a decision about the fall that wasn't like last fall. We would give people notice enough to make alternative plans.
Okay.
But so far,
Speaking
I'm
of
just waiting for everybody to come.
Speaking of enrollment, is this affecting the admissions in any way? We have that question from Thomas, a philosophy student.
Not this year's admissions, because that's all done, and as I said, the numbers are comparable and even better than last year in terms of the students getting back in touch with us saying, yes, they're coming, or no, they're not, they're going somewhere else. But next year, 2021 fall, there will be some changes. And this is pretty hot off the press, that will be not requiring an SAT or an ACT, because we're worried about students being able to access the test. So it's likely for 1 year only, and we'll develop a different strategy to come up with that index number that you may be familiar with. So looking at the A to G, the GPAs on the A to G courses, and other more holistic measures. So it'll be a 1 year for now, kind of stepping back from the standardized tests just because of the difficulty in students getting to take the test.
Awesome.
Just want to remind everyone that's watching, our live chat today is with Dr. Jane Conoley, President of Long Beach State, and joining us to talk with Jane is Rachel Barnes, Managing Editor of the Daily 49er at Long Beach State. If you have questions, please, and you're watching this live, you can type them in the comment line, and we'll pose every question that we can to Dr. Conoley. We have about 15 minutes left. Jane, I wanted to ask you about the educational partnership with other institutions in the city. It's a hallmark of Long Beach, the pathway between Long Beach Unified, City College, and Long Beach State. How have your conversations been with Dr. Steinhauser, with Luann Bynum, maybe even Jill Baker, newly appointed as the incoming superintendent? How's that partnership been with other educational institutions?
I think it's strong. I'm excited about Jill Baker. I just actually read the official word, although the word on the street has been around for a while that she would be a great choice. In fact, after our meeting today, I was hoping I'd have time to place a call to her or a personal email to congratulate her. So we've had, meetings about how we might be of better service to the community. You heard that the Pacific Coast Highway PCH campus of LBCC is being used for some COVID reasons, and yeah, so it's strong. I have to admit, we did cancel one meeting because we were all so busy, kind of handling all the kind of brush fires on our own campuses, that we decided we'd put it off until another week or so. So that'll give me a chance to maybe talk directly with Jill. I'm excited about that.
You've been, I was looking over your CV, Jane. You've been a leader at universities all over the country, Texas, Nebraska, Santa Barbara. I can't help but think that there will be things that will be forever different on the other side of this. Have you thought about the future? Have you considered what might be different in higher education, or what will be forever changed, not just at Long Beach State, but at universities across the country when this is over?
Yeah, I have a little bit, and that's become a kind of new genre. Now everybody's writing about in the higher ed news. Well, how will this change us forever? So in the short term, I worry because we've already gotten strong signals from the state government to expect pretty significant cuts. So we were a little bit upset, a month ago, because we weren't getting the increase that we felt that we needed, and now we're faced with perhaps not only not getting the increase, but actually getting cuts. So I think there'll be changes in the short term that will be, about how many people we can hire, can we support travel anymore, levels of hospitality and sponsorship. I think, but those are, those are not kind of core issues. So what other people are talking about would be, will more things be online? Because just the chance that you want to be insulated against this kind of situation where so many students are together, and it could be dangerous. It doesn't, we have a lot of online courses, and we have several online programs, but doesn't really match our kind of DNA to be an online university. I think we have a strong connection to our students, and we really like that. But we just talked about some of this earlier this morning, and one of the vice presidents said, well, I feel like we've been talking about having to schedule 6 days a week, and maybe that's a way we could spread students out a little bit so they wouldn't be faced with 50 people in a classroom, but rather 25 people in a classroom. We had a long meeting today about athletics. Athletics is taking a incredible double, triple whammies because the NCAA disbursements are down. They really lost their spring season. They have, seniors remaining eligible. So, I mean, that's a little bit in the weeds, but really every part of the university is likely to have to shrink a bit and then see what makes sense as we go forward. So it's an excellent question. I've given myself a breather that I don't have to figure it out until probably July.
Thank you.
Awesome. Let's see, I've got a couple more. So obviously, like we said before, not a lot of people were prepared for something this big to happen. And a lot of teachers weren't fully confident in doing online teaching. So is Beach Board and online teaching training going to be a bigger thing for our teachers? Is it going to become mandatory?
It will not be mandatory, but we actually were planning this summer to offer more training sessions, educational sessions for faculty members who want to learn the intricacies of how to do it. My husband is a professor, and he spent all day yesterday trying to figure out how to put his students, 66 students, in 11 different groups so that they could talk with each other. So he's interested, for example, in learning more about that. And I don't know, it would be great for our parking situation and for the environment if we had more hybrid classes, like you came one day, then you were online on the other day. So that might be something that happens, but we will definitely offer more training, to your point, and try to create a situation where we may be able to give a stipend to faculty who would take the time to do that.
Awesome. Sandy, a junior communications major on campus, wants to know, because other campuses are providing fee refunds for certain mandatory fees, like we have the ASI fee and stuff like that. Is our campus planning to do anything similar?
We have refunded fees for parking, for meal plans, and for housing. We're not planning to do other fee refunds. And the reason why, and I know this is a little in the weeds and obscure to people, but when you pay, for example, a fee for the recreation center, I'm sure in students' experience, they're paying to go into the recreation, student health and wellness. But what they're really doing is paying the mortgage on that building. And that building really is owned by the students. There's no general fund allowed to be involved in that. So I got a tweet from a student who said, I bet some of my tuition is paying for that. And I had to write back, no, there's no general fund, there's no tuition in that. So I know that's disappointing, but we're trying to do what we can we have, for example, just almost overnight successfully raised $200,000 to add to our student emergency fund. We're still doing the pantry, and we're looking for other things we can do. So, we're not not hearing, but that's another thing about the future. So, we gave the parking refunds, but that may have things downstream for that. Can we still afford then to do shuttles? Because we gave back money and that money really also pays the mortgages on the parking structures, as well as, paving the streets. So when you get into fees, it's not always, the personal experience is not always what's actually in the finances behind it. And I know a lot of students have asked about, they want a tuition refund because this is not what they signed up for. But, we have two major sources of money. The state sends us what we call general funds, and we get tuition. And we have now used all the general funds to pay all the salaries of all the faculty. And now we're using tuition dollars to pay the faculty. So although the method has changed, we're still paying the same number of staff. And in fact, some of our staff in their contracts have hazardous pay, so they get paid time and a half. So actually, our compensation costs have gone way up.
Hmm. You mentioned the ASI, the beach pantry. Our friends from the Bixby Knowles Food Pantry asked a question about if the pantry is well stocked, open for students who may be experiencing food insecurity. I know Miles Nevin's been posting a lot about ASI, but is the food pantries doing okay right now? Is there anything that the community can do to help?
We have, yes, because we think the demand is going to get much greater the longer our students are out of work, and we know that hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, have lost jobs or had their hours cut back. So we have online a kind of beach funder where people can donate specifically to the emergency fund, and all that money will just go to students. And we got $100,000 gift to say that that person will match up to 100,000, and we already have about 92,000. I checked right before I talked to you guys, but contributing to that is a great way to make sure if your interest is in the pantry or emergency housing or small grants up to $500 to tide somebody over, that's the place to go. There's also some federal money on the way, but I'm not smart enough to understand when that will arrive. But there is about $6 billion supposedly aimed right at students, but I don't know when we'll get it. So, but we're doing it. The way we're doing the pantry now is it's outside, and students will drive through, and they make a reservation so we don't have a crowd of students, and they get a bag full of stuff.
Great. We've got just a couple minutes left. I've just got one last question that's come in, and I'll hand it off to Rachel. The kind of talking about what you just said about community support. A question from a viewer about, are there other ways that the community can best support students, staff, faculty at this time?
That's a great question. Well, I think stick with us. I think there'll be harder times ahead if these actual cuts come to our budget. The last thing we ever cut are student services and classes, but there'll be. I think there'll be some bumpy roads ahead. So I'd say certainly come to whenever we're allowed to do performances again, come to our performances at the Carpenter Center and in our galleries and in our symphony and other musical things, and come to our museum. We have a whole new thing happening there. So we'd love to just get support that way and have a chance to renew those relationships.
Great. Rachel, I'll hand it over to you for the last couple of questions.
All right. So I have a question about the Department of Education stimulus funding. Have we received a cut of that? And if so, what are we planning to do with it?
We have not received it, Rachel, and we don't know exactly when we're going to receive it. I just read an article this morning about the $6 billion being sent out across the country. So we're going to try to figure out where is that, who's going to get that? How's it going to be distributed? What are the conditions of being distributed? So we have a whole team of people at the chancellor's office and a team on campus reading that bill, trying to figure out. We did have one of our auxiliaries, I guess it was, I think it was the shops, immediately applied for a grant that was made available to places that had, X number or lower employees, and they applied for a $2 million grant because they have had to shut down because they, unlike the state, we were able to budget for our positions. They depend on revenue coming in. So that's why so many students lost work at the shops. But we'll be on top of that. It's a great question.
All right. And I just have one more question. Because we are in a tough situation financially, has any department faced any cuts, or has any staff had to be let go because of this?
It hasn't happened yet, but I have to say yet. Everybody's been given the task to look at a 10% and a 20% cut, and how would we manage that? So, I'll be having conversations with a lot of departments and divisions. We had the first conversation with athletics this morning because they're pretty vulnerable in that way. So nothing's happened yet, but I think I think what will probably happen is we've had to put in a hiring chill, so we will not be replacing some people. And that, we've gone through that before. And I was not at Long Beach State when the recession was at its height, but they didn't lay anybody off, but they didn't hire anybody either. So if somebody left, everybody had to take, a shoulder more of a responsibility. So the conversations are ongoing, but so far, no decisions. And I'm hoping that we can get through it by a hiring freeze rather than laying anybody off.
Awesome.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, everyone out there watching today. Thank you to the viewers and everyone that submitted very thoughtful questions. Thank you, Dr. Jane Conoley, for joining us today, President of Long Beach State. To everyone, go Beach, stay healthy out there. Please join us here at the Long Beach Post tomorrow, where our daily live chats are continuing tomorrow. We are being joined by Kathy Ramaika, who is a local marriage and family therapist. Lot of stressful days at home. I've got 2 young kids at home, and tips about how to keep things safe at home and keep kids happy and strong is going to be something we'll be talking about tomorrow. So look for that and submit your questions tomorrow. Rachel Barnes, managing editor of the Daily 49er. Thank you. Dr. Conoley, thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.